I will just try and keep everything feeling natural. So it's like, it's nice that what we're doing has been really well received. And I just, it's just good sort of affirmation that like, yep, what you're doing is working. So just keep doing it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. We've talked about the exciting culinary evolution going on in the nation's capital, how a band of young professionals are creating a new wave off the back of the foundations built by a few legends before them. There's one small group in particular that are not only helping shine a light on what's happening in Canberra, but could hold their own in any capital city. Malcolm Hanslow is a co-owner and executive chef of Pilot and Such in Canberra. Malcolm, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. It's good to get you on the show. You guys are doing some pretty amazing things, and you're a bit of an underrated chef with what you're plating up. How are things going with the new place, Such?
Yeah, going really well. We've been open nearly 2 months now, so sort of at that stage, I've got first time to really sort of take a breath.
What's it been like opening a second venue off the success of Pilot, which we can talk about soon, but something that's a little different? Has there been challenges creating this second venue?
It's been challenges just in regards to freeing myself up to give it the right amount of time. But it's something I've sort of had in the back of my mind for probably the last 2 years-ish now. So from the food standpoint, just getting the food and the menu together, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad, to be honest.
Was there a different approach? Pilot, holds its own amongst the best restaurants in Australia, and Such is a more casual offering. But did you have to get in a different headspace in regards to the food?
Yeah, definitely. There was sort of many times when we're going through the menu planning phase, and then I was like, Mal, why are you making it so complicated? There was a lot of tweaking and altering to just to take a little bit out of it, because I wanted to offer something that was more simple, a little bit more approachable, but still really delicious. And also to give it has to have a different identity than Pilot. I didn't see the point in doing a Pilot too.
It's interesting hearing you talk of your food as perhaps getting a little bit too complicated, because it's been a real trademark from my perspective of your food is the lack of complication in dishes.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of techniques. There's a lot of what we do is hidden behind it. I don't like to be too flashy.
There's no doubt there's a lot of technique behind it. Does it take you a little while to sort of accept that restraint on the plate? What's the process been like to sort of make it less complicated?
It's been nice. It's a good little refresh, to be honest.
I want to explore what you're doing at Such and also this amazing success that Pilot has had in its short life. But take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family growing up?
I guess on a day-to-day basis, it wasn't much. I had two single parents, so they were really busy working. So there was a lot of just a lot of basic sort of. My dad's got one dish, so he's got his one dish, which is crumb lamb cutlets, and then just like microwave veg on the side. Then there's a lot of tomato sauce. So there's a lot of sort of just cheap takeaways. They were really busy. They both worked a lot. But then with my grandparents, they were living in there's a small town called Marywall, which is sort of in the Upper Hunter region. So I'd go up to there a lot during school holidays, and that was unreal. Their neighbours used to, when you're a little kid, you don't realise how cool it is, but their neighbours they'd grow, they had probably, I've got no idea how big it is really, maybe 60, 80 acres. And they had heaps of peaches, and they were growing strawberries. And I remember they used to breed quails for sale to restaurant, which was really cool to see all that stuff.
Do you remember any sort of feasts or dinners that you had with your grandparents that have sort of lived on with you?
Yeah, I remember we used to get My favorite when I was a little kid, oh man, I loved eating when I was a kid. We always used to have just like vanilla ice cream, and then my granny would always cook down all the peaches at the end of the season into just like a sugar syrup and preserve them. And it was just unreal. It was so, yeah, that was my favorite.
When did you first start getting interested in food and consider it as a potential career?
Wasn't until a bit later on. I left school reasonably early, and I just I just needed a job. So I started out. I was a kitchen hand, and then sort of slowly. I loved being a kitchen hand. It was really good. Like, it was great at the time. All I wanted to do was go to the skate park. So it was the perfect job. Or I could just go to the skate park all day, rock into work at 5, put my head down, do the pots, go home, happy days. And then I sort of slowly started to switch on. I remember, have staff meal a few times, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. How are these guys doing this? And then slowly, jump over, have a look at the desserts, and then all of a sudden you get interested on for kitchen shifts, and then you're not really doing the dishes anymore.
Tell us about those sort of first few years. What were the really important venues and people that you worked with that helped sort of set you on your trajectory?
I'd probably say the first place I really switched on, it was called Elicure, actually. It was with Josh. You had him on a few weeks ago. I worked there. I just sort of heard, I was working at another place, and it was probably when I was a second-year apprentice, and I heard, there's these guys over in Belconnen, these young guys, and they're pushing really hard, and and I was like, sounds pretty good. Why don't I have a go over there? So ended up, I just walked in, got a job there, and it was very simple cooking looking at it now, but I think it gave me a really good sort of foundational techniques. If we were making, just making creme caramel, for example, it was set, just showing you how to set it perfectly, or when you're cooking off your soffritto, how far to cook a soffritto, like that. Sort of very basic stuff, but they were really big into the basics being done really well.
You've been you mentioned Josh briefly, but you and he have been part of this evolution that's grown in Canberra and contributed in various ways. Has there been venues that have been really important from your perspective that you've worked at to help that evolution?
Yeah, I think 86 changed Canberra quite a bit. Yeah. That was really good. That was my first. I was really young then. That was my first big sort of head chef role. There was a lot to take on at the time. I think 23 or 24. So yeah, it was a lot. I was definitely I just used my relentless energy to make up for the lack of talent that I had and experience. Yeah, we got it done. It was pretty wild at the time. It was good.
What surprised you about that role as head chef at the time, and what were the challenges that you faced?
I think at the time I'd have been a sous chef before, but up until that point, like, I'd never had to be responsible for so many people before, and then really realizing, I had to have not only be on top of what I was doing, but then I had to sort of be on top of what I was doing, but be able to free myself up to help others and give myself like time to train and time to manage effectively, I suppose.
At such a young age, being in such an important role, tell us about your food at that time. What was it like trying to sort of create your voice on the plate?
Oh, it was challenging. I guess sort of, yeah, challenging. And I just wanted to make it just really, really tasty. That was all. And I don't know, looking back at the time, I didn't have as much experience as I should have. But you're just going for it, It was good.
Well, 86 did take Canberra by storm. Were there any sort of dishes that really stand out from your time there as head chef that you can tell us about that you think sort of were part of that evolution?
Yeah, I just remember what's a good one? Probably they did this black chicken dish, which is just like we just sous vide chicken legs and then just basted in this really like quite spicy, sweet, salty, sort of barbecuey marinade number. And then we'd just blast it under the Sally, so it would get like really, really blackened and barbecuey. It was with like a lot of coleslaw. Yeah, it was always like a really like a well-dressed coleslaw. I think I kind of, I geeked out on probably the making of the coleslaw way more than the others. I always find like vegetables extremely interesting.
You spent some time in Sydney at a number of restaurants. Take us on that experience. What was it like for you moving to Sydney, and what were some of the venues that really had an impact on you?
Yeah, it was great. So sort of 86 did really well. And I was there for around 3.5 years-ish. And then I sort of just got to a point and I was like, I want to continue to learn. So I was luckily enough, I had a friend of mine who was working at Automata and he got me a job there. Yeah, and it was great. It was great. I think it was a good age and a good sort of stage in my career to sort of take a step back and just go and learn. And I was really, really lucky that I'd been cooking for a while at that point because it sort of just really let me focus on a little bit deeper than just trying to keep up. I could really focus on like, why is the food great here? If that makes sense.
Clayton Wells did amazing things with Automata. What did you take from your time working with him and working at that restaurant?
Yeah, it was great. Just a lot of just the precision and like how, I know it sounds weird, but how autonomous, he implement changes and just so many different cooking techniques that I hadn't sort of seen before, different ways to do things. It was quite a busy place. I think at the time, we're doing sometimes there'd be 5 or 6 of us in the kitchen and we're doing around 120 covers. And but just how seamlessly he could just blend it and merge it. Unreal. And just, he just had so much experience and he was, fantastic cook.
What sort of impact did your time in Sydney have on you? Were you there for long?
I was there for about 4.5 years all up. It was really good. I'm so glad I did it. It was a hard decision to leave, but I was kind of at a point in my career where I realised like I'd been doing a few little pop-up things because I was like, all right, Mal, if you want to be serious about this, you've got to learn and go and cook your own food again. Essentially. And then, I needed to practice. I'd been doing my own pop-up things. Generally in Canberra, I had more connections in Canberra to be able to do that. And then, just sort of, the opportunity came up to come down and open pilot. So that, it just worked well.
Tell us about that opportunity. How did it come about, and what forced your hand? What led to you moving back to jump into it?
So I'd been mates with Ross and Dash for years, and they did a few little pop-up things in Canberra years ago. So, I'd come down, I'd help them do a few different events, and they'd came to a few of mine, and we all met working at 86. It was around 10 years ago now. And Dash was working in Sydney at Momo, so we'd sort of go for it. We'd just have a weekly hang, usually on a Monday. And then we talked about it quite a bit, and they were really keen to open something. And I guess, it was just, I had a feeling, it was just time to go home. So
this episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, using technology helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW. Pilot's impact is quite extraordinary, but I know you've had lots of challenges and sort of getting it up and running and getting people over the line with what you guys had created there. But is the original vision and concept sort of what we see today with Pilot?
I suppose it's kind of morphed over time. I think what you want changes as you slowly go, and it's kind of always worked. I didn't ever expect Pilot to be a degustation restaurant, to be honest. But yeah, I had a bit of. So we decided to go to degustation only after the first lockdowns, and I was quite nervous about it, to be honest. I guess I'd always had a feeling that even though I'd worked in a lot of degustation only restaurants at that time, I was always like, that's what like the really good chefs do. So I was quite nervous. I was like, oh, all right, let's have a go, But yeah, I'm glad we did now.
Let's talk about your food at Pilot a little bit because as you say, before the pandemic, it was incredible food to share at the table and not necessarily a degustation sort of style food. But is there some sort of dishes you can talk about pre-pandemic and then how the food changed a little bit with that adaptation to degustation?
Yeah, that's cool. So I think I remember that lamb kebab dish that we were doing. What cut was it? I think it was lamb shoulder. So I was just portioning up lamb shoulders, slow cooking. Then I was doing like it was really like quite sort of spicy chili kind of rub. And then we're just charring it really, really heavily. I think there was a sweet glaze in there. I can't really remember. And then so it was just like really nice, like pull apart sort of lamb. There's these little flatbreads. There were sort of a lot of butter in them, so they were really sort of kind of sweet and kind of when you cook them, they nearly went a little bit croissant-y. They were really nice. And then the sauce we're doing was just like a supercharged garlic sauce. So I just caramelizing yogurt. So it's like a caramelized yogurt. So we cook that down for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and just really slowly caramelize it with heaps of confit garlic and then just enough garlic fresh to just sort of give it that a little bit of bite. And then I was working in all the drippings from the roasting of the lamb. I was reducing them really heavily and then reincorporating that into the sauce. So it was really quite hectic. Which was, so we're doing, I don't know, stuff like that. So it was obviously, there's quite a lot of work, but it's also trying to just present it in a really, just a shareable, fun kind of way. And I guess like now, food at Pilot, a really good example is, so I don't know, I like to, it sounds weird, but I like to, when there's big groups of people, I like to sort of watch people eat. And what I noticed was that Hawaiian pizza gets a lot of bad rap, but if it's ordered in a big group of pizzas and there's lots of people eating, it's always one of the ones that's gone first. So we wanted to do like a little Hawaiian tart as one of the snacks. So I made a little grissini dough, lots of black pepper in it, and then we bake that into a tart shell. Then do a little, it's like an andouille set cream on the bottom. So that's sort of, your tomato element, because it's so small, it's a 2-biter, so everything's got to be supercharged. Then we do it with little bits of fermented pineapple, some little tiny dehydrated smoked cherry tomatoes, and then just some really crispy salami on top, just to sort of really supercharge the traditional ham kind of element.
That sounds amazing. One of the wonderful elements of your food is this tongue-in-cheek nature to it. There's often a play on some sort of classic thing that you wouldn't necessarily see in such a sort of fine dining sort of setting. Tell us about where your ideas come from and the creative process for your dishes.
I just think it's generally just, I don't know, memories of stuff I had from the takeaway shop, or I don't know. I just like to have a look at sort of, I don't know, the things that I eat that I enjoy, but then how can I sort of cheferize them?
Give us an example of one or two of those. I know there's been a few in desserts, with like a Viennetta. There was a play on that once.
Okay, something I loved when I was a kid, we're doing it at such and such at the moment, is I loved, there was a takeaway chain fish and chip store. It was called Ocean Master. And I used to love it. I remember I used to get it after soccer training on Thursdays. And then I've actually come to realize I don't really love fish and chips. I just love tartare sauce, which I know is strange, but I was like, why do you really like this? I was like, I just like tartare sauce. So at such, I wanted to do a bit of like an Ocean Master throwback. So getting these really nice little dusky flatheads, and then I'm tunnel boning them because I wanted to do a whole fish dish, but I wanted to do it in a different way. So we're tunnel boning them, but leaving them whole. And then just pankoing them, frying them. But then I was like, and then we serve it with like a sort of spiced up yogurty tartare, and then just a little rosé salad with lots of pickles and stuff through it. And then I think I wanted to make like a very interesting spice mix for it. So we're doing it's just basically za'atar that's blitzed up really heavily with like a big whack of like black and lime through it, and it just really lifts it, I think.
It's amazing. Let's talk about Pilot for a moment. Its success is quite phenomenal, but I know we've had Dash and we've had Ross on the show previously, and they've talked about the challenges and moments where you may have closed and turning points. For you, what's it been like sort of as the backbone with the food and those challenging moments? Was there a turning point where sort of Pilot came to life for you?
Yeah, I think things really started to come together when we decided to just go full degustation. It kind of took a lot of, just realistically, we went from producing 24 or 25 menu items to producing 12. So, like, obviously the scale goes up, but I just think it really allowed us to just really focus on getting those little things right, and we could just push it a little bit further, spend more time doing less processes.
That's an interesting perspective, giving yourself sort of more time. Did you find that your food changed and the creative process changed a little bit?
A little bit. I just think all it really allowed me to do is just refine things a touch further. Sort of instead of running, it's not a big team at Pilot. A lot of the time when we first opened, there'd be 3 or 4 of us in the kitchen. So I guess it just allowed me to really just like refine dishes a bit more. Whereas before, a lot of the time it was, oh man, we're really, really busy. Don't really have time for it. Let's just slap this together and then, it tastes all right and it'll be good in 2 weeks. Whereas now there's a lot more, I think, refinement goes into it before we put it on the menu. And I guess that's also growing up a little bit too, when you first, really try and push and, it's like you want to show everyone everything that you know how to do all the time. And then you kind of realize the customers don't necessarily want or need that, or you don't need to do that, so you can go a little bit slower, refine things further before we, get the go ahead.
It's a really amazing young dynamic group with the 3 of you, the trio, Dash Rumble, Ross McQueen and yourself sort of working together. Tell us about that dynamic and who sort of looks after what, and is there sort of crossover to get everything and the same sort of message through? Yeah,
so Ross will do a lot of the finance, which is great as well, like, finance, pay runs, a lot of the back of house. Then Dash looks after the front of house of both venues, and we have really great restaurant managers in both. So they sort of look after the day-to-day, and Dash will sort of run the overarching. And then I just sort of look after the kitchen side of things.
With that creativity, do they come into sort of the equation when you're creating dishes? Are they sort of a sounding box for you?
A little bit, but I'm pretty lucky, you know. I just go for it, like a little bit, you know. There's sometimes things that they remember will kind of, you know, be like, oh, cool, you know, why don't I do a version of that, you know, whatever they're talking about. You know, I think a good example is making us like a little financiers in one of the dishes at Pilot at the moment. And then I remember I got the idea because Ross was talking about how his mum used to make a version when he was a kid that he really loved. But she didn't know the name, so they used to call them kefir cakes. So, yeah, you know, I'll take a lot of, you know, their kind of, you know, perspective of stuff, and then, you know, I'll just make my version of it, I suppose. And then,
let's talk about Canberra at the moment. You're sort of part of this new wave that's going on. What's it like to be part of it, and how do you explain to people outside of Canberra sort of what's going on here in regards to sort of this young energy and the food scene?
Yeah, it's great. It's what I've always loved about Canberra is I've always found there's great opportunities here. And then I just think in the last, like, you know, 5-ish years, you know, I've kind of been back for nearly 5 years now. Just the change that's slowly happening. You know, there's a lot of young guys, like Josh is really pushing forward at Rockford, which is great. And there's Sean McConnell. I really love Rebel. It's been really, really cool. EXO guys are plowing ahead, you know. And then there's a lot of the smaller little, kind of the younger guys, you know. I really love like the Sanducci, you know. There's all these little hubs. Paranormal Wines is great, you know. It's just weird little hubs, you know. It's starting to really come together, which is great. Under Bakery's doing great things.
What's this success been like for you? You've had sort of recognition nationally, and you're listed in the top 10 at one stage as well for Pilot. What sort of impact has that sort of had on what you do?
It's been quite surprising, to be honest. I didn't expect it would. I didn't ever think Pilot was going to do what it's done. I just think it kind of adds pressure to a certain degree. But pressure is not necessarily a bad thing as well, but it's also like, it's a good sort of affirmation that, you know, we're on the right path. And it's sort of, everything's always felt, I will just try and keep everything feeling natural. So it's like, you know, it's nice that what we're doing has been really well received. And I just, you know, it's just good sort of affirmation that, like, yep, what you're doing is working. So just keep doing it.
Well, what you guys are doing is pretty incredible, and both venues could hold their own in any capital city. What is it that you love about what you do?
I just really love cooking, which I know sounds weird, but just like cooking just brings me, you know, a lot of happiness and like heaps of joy. So yeah, I just love cooking.
Well, it shows in the offering, Mal, and a lot of people really love when you cook as well. It's been an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear just a part of your story. Congratulations on the new venue, such and such, and please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much. It was awesome to be on.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.